Hi everyone, so my name's Kerry Leeson Beavers. I'm the Chief Executive of Alström Syndrome UK and Breaking Down Barriers. I'm a patient representative on England's Rare Disease Framework Delivery Group, and I also take part in lots of different research projects and looking at particularly around patient and public involvement and engagement. So great to be here. Over to you, Tim. You're on mute, Tim.
Do apologise. My name's Tim Barrett. I'm a children's doctor based in Birmingham Children's Hospital and Birmingham University. I've been interested in rare diseases for a long time because of my practice in paediatric endocrinology, and I've been involved in setting up and delivering three highly specialised rare disease services, but also some regional ones that haven't had highly specialised funding, getting industry funding money in, and also some local ones where we've not had that funding too. So it's a great pleasure to be here and share my experience.
Okay, so just a quick introduction to Alström. So we'll be looking at Alström syndrome service today as a bit of an example within the highly specialised services. So just an introduction to how we began. So the charity was established in 1998 by parents in Devon, Kay and John Parkinson. The charity was set up to find other people diagnosed with the condition, but also to support clinicians to really develop an understanding of the condition and to know how best to treat patients. So in those early days, we used to hold clinics in hotel rooms where doctors kindly gave up their time to learn a bit more about the condition. We then moved on to really fight for a highly specialised service because it's something that we really felt was important for our community. But then we also wanted to be funded alongside that as equal partners in that service because we had the database of Alström patients, but also had a really good understanding of the complex health needs and the disabilities that are associated with the condition. So we were successful in getting that service set up, and I'll hand over to Tim to explain how we did that.
Yeah, so I saw my first child with Alström syndrome in a clinic in Birmingham over 20 years ago, and I had this frustrating tale of a family who were going to one hospital to see the diabetes doctor, another hospital to see the eye doctor, somewhere else to see the dietitian, missing loads of time off school, parents missing lots of time off work as well, and we would really wanted to try and develop with the patient support group a one-stop shop model. So on one visit to a hospital, we'd be able to help them to see the heart doctor, the diabetes doctor, the genetics counsellor, get access to genetic testing, etc. as well, on the one visit, minimizing the time off school altogether. So really, my first involvement with this one-stop shop was in this Alström service, which we co-developed with Kay Parkinson at the time, the lead, and then Kerry afterwards as well. And it's really enabled us to make sure that we all talk to each other as doctors and other healthcare professionals and have a bit more of a joined-up approach, but also to try and reduce that multiple hospital visits and multiple duplication of investigations that families were facing before we had this opportunity to develop this. Right. Kerry, did you want to start with that first point? Yeah.
I can do. So we've been working together to put together some top 10 tips really from our experiences of developing the service. So our top 10 tips then. So number one is partnership with the patient community, service providers and commissioners. So Tim, do you want?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. In the very first, when we started this out altogether, the patient support group had a very strong voice in Kay Parkinson and others as well, who were very keen to advise us. They're the experts by lived experience and knew what were the requirements for their children and indeed the adults with this as well. And really with their support, we were able to leverage support from the hospital to try and join up the services into a one-stop shop model. To begin with, before we had national highly specialised funding, this was very much done on a sort of a goodwill basis. So I would ask colleagues who were also seeing these patients separately, could we do a joint clinic together in the same hospital? And that's often the way these services start out, really. Very few services get money from the outset. We had to do it on a sort of a goodwill basis as well. But that worked because it was much more efficient for the families to have the for the services to be delivered co-located and at the same time as well. So we did that. The second point, I think, really there was actually deciding where to hold these. As Kerry said, the family support group who started this survey was in Torbay Hospital because there was an interested physicians and specialists there who'd seen their families in the first place. And it was a really good model, but once it was scaled up to a national service requiring additional specialists that were not available in Torbay, it seemed to make more sense to come to a regional centre. And that's how we ended up bringing the service to Birmingham, both for children and for adults. There became a need for some patients to have access to things like cardiac surgery, transplantation surgery, and others as well, which could only be provided in a regional service. And it seemed to work in Birmingham because of the road and rail travel access and also the specialists available there as well. But Kerry, I don't think that was a major limiting factor of patient travel for your families, was it?
No, certainly not. And I think that's something that we often hear in the rare disease community, is that patients want care as close to their home as possible. But what we find with Ulstrom is really they will travel to the ends of the earth to get the expertise. And I think it's because it's such a complex condition, with many different organs affected. I think having a multidisciplinary team of experts, people that travel often isn't a barrier. Often, obviously, there's lots of support that we can put around that to help people to get to where they need to be. And one of our roles as a charity is to support and help facilitate that travel, but also to provide accommodation as well when people do come to clinics.
Yeah, and getting the community involved was important. I think to have a strong personality in the patient support group at the beginning to get the service set off was a real advantage, and we absolutely needed that to drive the service forward. But as the service evolved, it became apparent there were other service needs that were required as well, and it's been really helpful, I think, to recognise those and get a wider team involved in the development of the service, and to do that in partnership with the patient support group and the commissioners has been really helpful, I think, to get that part. So that engagement with the community has identified other complications as time has gone on that we've realised that we need to address that perhaps we didn't know in the first place. So the service has matured with that wider involvement.
And I think the needs of families, I think we've developed our understanding as time's gone on as well. I think, like you said, Tim, that having those dominant voices in the early days and really fighting to get the services in place and for what people need. I think it's really important that we have those real strong vocal patient advocates. But I think we always need to make sure that we're representative of the entire population of people that we support. So we really need to make those extra efforts to listen to people and involve people with voices often don't go unheard, and sometimes that's about thinking outside of the box and making sure that we find different ways to be as inclusive and as accessible as we can to involve people in a variety of different ways, so that we are developing an understanding of those needs, but that we're helping people to share their concerns, but addressing a lot of the barriers and challenges that people experience.
Yeah. And then coming on to funding models, I think this is quite a contentious issue for a lot of people in trying to set up a service. This service was set up before NHS England came into existence under the old system, what was called NSCAG at that point, and we were able to get top slice funding across the NHS for highly specialised services if it affected less than 400 or 500 people. Alstrom affects less than 100 people, I think, Kerry, altogether, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that. So we're able to get funding, but it's not the only funding mechanism to use here. To get that, and I'll mention some others in a moment, to get that funding, we had to demonstrate a clear patient input into the service, i.e. they'd have to have a clinical diagnosis at the least, because genetic testing wasn't always easily available at the beginning, had to demonstrate equity of access to all parts of our community, and indeed pathways for patients from Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland to be able to access it as well, and a clear output from that service, and then at national and annual audit days to demonstrate the impact. And in this particular case, the key impact for us was to have an earlier diagnosis, to reduce that diagnostic odyssey in the first place, and to offer genetic diagnosis to all participants as well, and to demonstrate some key clinical features such as reducing diabetes and body mass index, etc. as well. But just to briefly mention that there are other funding models as well, which we'll come on to. And if a service is not eligible for highly specialised funding because of larger numbers, then what we're able to do in our hospital in other commoner rare diseases is actually work with the hospital to actually cohort patients with a particular condition into one particular clinic, pulling them together from a various range of other clinics altogether, so that there would be no impact on the hospital activity or indeed the room space. But by cohorting that way, we could develop some expertise in one condition and sometimes invite other clinicians to come in and co-deliver those clinics with us. So we do joint clinics with our genetics colleagues. In Prader-Willi syndrome, joint clinic with a spinal surgeon, for instance, and others joint clinics with psychologists, etc. But I think, Kerry, you've managed to get other funding models to come in this service, haven't you, through AS UK, other people?
Yeah, so I think in terms, obviously, we are fortunate to have the contract with NHS England for this partnership, but I think we are still very reliant on grants and other funding models as well to kind of to deliver the whole family support service that we provide. Because obviously our contract within in terms of the clinics is a portion of what we do, but our services extend beyond that as well. So I think it's always looking for different ways to bring in funding, and we know how challenging that can be for patient organisations as well. One of the things I would say, there are different things that we do to really demonstrate to the impact, and we'll go on later to talk a bit about the feedback that we gather, but it's really making sure that we're providing an equitable service and that our service is accessible as well. And I think one of the place to start there is to really get an understanding of the people that it is that we're supporting within our community. So our database is a really comprehensive database. We know 55% of our members are from an ethnic minority community, speaking 17 different languages. We can tell you the number of people born male, born female, number of people with a learning disability. So there's so many things that we need to understand about our community to be able to design a service that to meet their needs, and then to be able to demonstrate the impact of what it is that we're providing. So I think one of my big top tips really is to really develop that understanding of the communities that we're there to serve.
And it's worth saying, I think, isn't it, with Alström Syndrome UK, that it was developed with some really important assets to support the service, such as that patient database, that the knowledge of the local families as well, and bringing that into the clinical service altogether. And that was really the main driver for making sure that AS UK got funded as an equal partner in the first place with the two hospital providers as well, so that it was clearly a partnership of equals.
It was, but also, Tim, I think one of the really important roles is to raise awareness, because we need to make sure that we're reaching all the people out there that have got a diagnosis of Alström. I think there's still some issues within the system where people aren't necessarily referring people to a highly specialised service, either because they don't know it exists or because there's concerns around how it's funded, and whether it needs to be funded by a local team, or whether it's there's some misunderstanding really around national commissioning and things like that. So I think we've still got more work to do with that, but I think we should never be complacent and sit back. We still receive people, we still get people referred to us who have only just received a diagnosis, and they can be in their 20s and 30s. So I think that raising awareness and making people aware that service is there is still a really important part of the work that we do.
Yeah, and I have to say, the work that your family liaison officers do is absolutely invaluable in the clinic. I was delivering an Alström clinic a week before last, and to have that key worker from AS UK in the clinic supporting the families in their journey to Birmingham and through the clinic pathway is absolutely invaluable for us as well to take part. But it's not the only model. Obviously, it's unusual, I think, for NHS England to fund a charity as an equal partner for that, but there are models as other models as well. So in another service that I'm involved in, the Wolfram service, the hospital has a service level agreement with the patient support group to provide slightly similar sorts of services as well, so that there are other potential funding models for patient support groups to be involved in. And then there's other examples of services where we're able to get honorary contracts for a member of the patient support group to sit in on clinics with us and support patients through that journey as well. I think AS UK have got the most highly developed model of it, which has been fantastic to be part of as well.
And I think it's also important to recognise that, I know there's many patient organisations out there that would like a similar model to AS UK, but I don't think there is that one size fits all within the rare disease community. Some people would want that more localised care, and where possible, and maybe where, our condition is an ultra rare genetic condition. As we say, there's less than 100 people. So that lack of knowledge, lack of expertise within local service providers is a real challenge. And as I said, not everybody would want to have to travel to that service. So I think it's really important that we have those different services out there that are more equipped to meet the needs of people with different and specific conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we have the next slide, please? So our next set of top tips really, the next two are really looking at our industry partnerships. So number 6 is to involve patient organisations early for input on trial design, accessibility and inclusivity. We've had very little involvement from industry in terms of the Alstrom service, so we don't have any condition-specific treatment for our condition. We have been fortunate to have 2 clinical trials that took place a couple of years ago, and varying different experiences there. So the first company involved ASUK right from the early phases. So we were involved in the protocol design, and we also were able to negotiate a contract with them as well, which meant that we could support that clinical trial in a similar way that we do to the clinical service. So we could help people to arrange their travel, to accommodation. We helped translate information into plain language, particularly looking at consent forms and information sheets and things like that we could input on. But then with the second company, they involved us in a much later stage, and actually we found that the design of that study wasn't as accessible, and it had a real impact on the recruitment and retention within the clinical trial. So I think my top tip is really to involve that patient organisation really on, because they often understand the needs of the community and can help to overcome a lot of the barriers and challenges at a really early stage before it actually gets rolled out to patients, so that it's much more chance of being a smooth journey with more chance of success. And then the number 7 is to explore opportunities for industry support beyond clinical trials and treatment development. I remember when we first were, we first got approached by industry, and we knew that there was chance of a clinical trial. It was quite a daunting time for us as a patient organisation, because it was the first time that we'd been involved in, with industry. We'd done a lot of preparation to get to a point where we could support patients through a clinical trial. So I'd attended the Eurodis Summer School. I'd been involved in European Medicines Agency on the paediatric committee as a patient representative, and took part in different research projects to try and upskill us to be in a position where we could support people through that process. But it was actually the help from Christine Lavery at the MPS Society, being able to reach out and get some support from Christine, who was a lot more experienced than I was at the time, and she really helped to guide me through that. So another top tip from me would be to reach out to those organisations that have got skills in different areas, to be able to get that support. And I think, because one of the things we worry about is it appropriate to have to receive funding from pharmaceutical companies? How do we maintain our independence? Is it okay, for industry to contribute towards our conferences and things like that? But I think often it's that the lesson is to really learn our worth and our value, and the role that we bring, and our understanding, and how that can contribute to that that clinical trial development and the route to drug development. Anything that you want to add there, Tim?
Yeah, if I just add on point 6, so there's a really nice initiative by the medical charity LifeArc that's just kicked off in the last couple of years, setting up centres for expertise in rare diseases. And one particular one, Centre for Accelerating Rare Disease Trials, is a consortium partnership between the Universities of Birmingham, Newcastle, and Queen's University of Belfast. And this very much is actually to try and get the patient a voice into the trial design. Too many clinical trials are very onerous for patients to take part in rare diseases, and too many of them look at outcomes that are of interest to doctors rather than the patients themselves. And what LifeArc are trying to do through this centre is to get patient input and involvement into choosing patient-reported outcomes, get the regulators accepting those outcomes, and trying to make the trial designs less onerous, with hopefully less need to have placebo control arms as part of it. And Kerry, we're very grateful for the work you do in that as well, with the lived experience people there as part of it. So there's you can find it on the website for LifeArc, but also Rare Disease Research UK. That website as well has got a lot of information about that initiative, which hopefully will make a difference for people living with rare diseases. And on the second point, there are other opportunities I've found. I've been able to access industry support, and my colleagues have as well. If a drug suddenly gets licensed for a particular rare disease indication, there's often an incentive for industry to support the setting up of clinics for that particular condition in order to make accessible the newly licensed treatment for that condition. And we've seen it with particular drugs for tuberous sclerosis coming in, other ones for Prader-Willi syndrome coming through as well. And the funding has supported a nurse facilitator to help, and in my case, a clinical psychologist to support the emotional well-being needs of the participants who are coming in. So working with industry on that way through the National Health Service is a really good way of getting funding in if a drug has been recently licensed for treatment in that condition. Okay, we better go. I think time's moving on. Did you want to kick off on transition, Kerry?
Yep. So our next couple of points, top tips focus around transition, and then this is a topic that me and Tim are both quite passionate about as well. So I think so. Number 8 is to embed transition planning into rare disease services from the outset. As Tim mentioned, our adult service moved from Torbay to Birmingham, and I think that really helped in terms of transition because it meant that our paediatric service and our adult service were both within Birmingham. We're really fortunate to have a transition coordinator as part of the Ulstrom service, who actually works 1 day a week for ASUK as well, so we can really build in, develop that transition support for people. I think one of the things we always say is that transition is a process. It's not just a point in time. I think sometimes people confuse transition with transfer. Obviously, the transferring from a paediatric service to an adult service is really important, but I think it's that process that we start around from the age of 11, really looking at the kind of knowledge, skills, and confidence of young people as they're involved within a highly specialised service and learning, living with a rare condition. So we've developed resources within ASUK that's called TCASH, which is Transition Knowledge and Skills in Healthcare, and with that comes a set of resources called My Life, My Future, which really helps to prepare young people, but also to prepare parents and carers as well, because transition is a really tricky time for them as well, but also for healthcare professionals to start having those conversations. And then, what we find is that young people are much more prepared and feel much more confident when it comes to the point of transferring over to an adult service, having had all that preparation and support through that. And then number 9 is to work collaboratively across paediatric and adult teams to develop that relationship. So in terms of our transition, the support that we offer, we run joint clinics with the paediatric and the adult team as well, that's facilitated with support from the transition coordinator. We do orientation visits so that young people can actually visit the adult service, they can visit the adult teams, we provide resources that describe, because people living with Ulstrom are often deaf and blind. So it's being able to describe what some of the tests are like, what some of the machinery, and really help people to prepare for coming to an adult service. Ulstrom is a progressive condition, so actually the number of tests and consultations that they have in an adult service is often more than they'd have within a paediatric setting. So it's really important to prepare people for that and to support them through that process.
Yes, I think we have the advantage and disadvantages of providing the adult and the children's services on separate sites, 2 miles apart up the road. So that transition process is really important to us for that. So the orientation visit. So if children are coming and they're coming to close to transition age and their annual review visit to the children's, we try and find time during the day to take a taxi and taxi them over to the adult site just to orientate themselves, familiarise themselves with the clinic layout, and hopefully meet 1 or 2 members of the team if possible as well, so that it's less stressful, hopefully, when they make that transition. And then on the second point 9, where practicable, we try and do the first visit to the adult side in a dedicated transition clinic where they're just seeing people of their own cohort, and at least 2 of the members of the paediatric team will try and join the adult team for that where we can as well. Yeah. The final point, I think, really about patient feedback. This has been invaluable to us to try and develop service improvements as well. After each clinic, the patient support group will provide a bespoke feedback on the patient's experiences of that clinic, what went well, what didn't so well, and what would be improvements for the future. And it's also used to support the audit process with commissioners as well going forward. We find that's incredibly helpful for the detail that it provides, and also actionable points that we can use to spread across the whole team to try and improve that. And I think you built up a lot of expertise in that patient feedback now, haven't you, Kerry, through the ASUK?
Yeah. So it's one of the big, the main points of our service specification within NHS England is to gather that feedback after each clinic, and we've found different ways to do that because, as we said before, there is no one size fits all. So some people will feel really comfortable filling in a feedback form, some not so much. So we gather feedback in very different ways, and also to identify ways to continually improve the service. So I think one of the things that's helpful sometimes having that patient organisation involved is that we are obviously slightly removed from the hospitals as well. So we're sometimes seen as that critical friend. you know, if we see something that's not working, we can point that out, but it's really important that we work with the clinicians and with families living with Alström to identify ways to continuously improve. So I think working together, as you know, it's a really successful model in that, you know, we don't just go along with everything that happens and, you know, and you know, and don't look for ways of improving it. This is something that we do all the time, and we understand how challenging it can be for NHS providers, particularly with funding restraints and things like that at the minute. But we've been able to find innovative ways really to continuously improve that service and adapt to meet different needs. And I think, you know, one of our main thing that shows that we've been successful in our service is because we can demonstrate it through the feedback and the comments that we receive. But also the number of do not attends. So we have 100% attendance at all of our clinics. I think since the service was developed in 2007, we've only had 2 people that didn't attend a clinic. We've only had 2 spaces left in clinic, and that's because of last minute, you know, real serious illness. So I think it's, you know, we've got a great team that can work together to support and help with the preparation and support through clinic and follow up. That is a real good marker to show the success of our clinics. But I think, you know, one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning, it's the most important thing I should have mentioned, is that I'm a parent and my eldest son has Alström syndrome as well. And I think what's been really encouraging for me to see is the difference that these clinics make, because you can really see the impact it's having on people's health outcomes, but also on their quality of life as well. And that's demonstrated with the evidence that we've really been able to collect throughout the development of the services over the years.